In an effort to reduce obstacles that hinder faster growth of investment, the government has established a one-stop center for investors which will be operational by April 2017. The government has also established e-regulation and will soon be establishing an e-opportunities to enable investors interested in Kenya to search for investment opportunities available in Kenya from the comfort of their homes. These initiatives, in addition to existing Huduma centers, will provide comprehensive information to investors on licenses, permits, and approvals that are currently offered in a multiplicity of government agencies located in different parts of the city, further sustaining increased FDI inflows in the country. Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the complaints from our business communities of double taxation of the activities by county governments. This is not only bad for our investment climate, but is also a violation of Article 209 of our Constitution. Accordingly, I will be making legislative proposals to Parliament that will set out how county governments may raise revenue without violating the Constitution and raising the cost of doing business. Mr. Speaker, in the past 4 years, the government has invested heavily in security in order to make Kenyans and their properties safe and secure. This investment has progressively reversed security threats, especially those posed by terrorism, and this has been the sector make a strong comeback with increased employment. In addition, to further secure the country and reduce crime rates, we have substantially increased the number of our police officers to more than 98,732 compared to 78,885 in 2013. This has narrowed the ratio of police to citizens to one officer to about 400 citizens, just about the United Nations recommendation of one officer to 450 citizens. Mr. Speaker, our police officers have been equipped to respond faster to distress calls. In 4 years, we have acquired an additional 3,208 police service vehicles, thus significantly improving their mobility. To sustain police mobility and security operations, I have allocated 8.1 billion for lease of police service vehicles, 24.8 billion for police and military modernization, 12 billion for enhanced security operations, 0.9 billion for construction and equipping of the National Forensic Laboratory, and 2 billion for securing our borders. Today, Mr. Speaker, police officers have a comprehensive medical insurance cover and group life insurance cover. To improve our police welfare, I have allocated 5.1 billion for police and prisons officers medical insurance cover, 1.7 billion for group life insurance for police. Mr. Speaker, to enhance community security and facilitate timely access to crime scenes, the government invested in CCTV cameras and improved street lighting in major towns. The cumulative effect of investing in our security has seen a significant reduction in crime. For instance, in Nairobi alone, between 2014 and 2016, cases of robberies fell by 32%. Motor vehicles theft fell by 43%. And offenses targeting individuals such as mugging also fell by 27%. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the Constitution and reforms in Parliament, in the parliamentary and judicial areas remain priorities of the government. In order to strengthen the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and improve access to justice in judiciary, I am allocating 36 billion to Parliament and 18.1 billion to judiciary in this budget. Mr. Speaker, as we are all aware, Kenya will be going into elections in August this year. The government is committed to free and fair elections. In addition to the 19.3 billion in this financial year to cater for electoral-related operations, we have allocated an additional 21.4 billion in financial year 2017-2018 to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to prioritize the war against corruption. To this end, the government has implemented the measures articulated in the National Call to Action Against Corruption and strengthened various institutions that are mandated to fight corruption. To further support this institution, these institutions have allocated 4 billion to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, 2.3 billion to the Department of Public Prosecution, 210.7 million to the Asset Recovery Agency, 300 million to Financial Reporting Center, 6.7 billion to the Criminal Investigation Services, and 6.1 billion to the Office of the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, everyone has a role to play in the fight against corruption. In this connection, and working with the government of the United Kingdom, we have traced and recovered 577 million Kenya shillings from the Smith and Usman case and the Jassy case. The recovered amounts have been used to support the health sector and clean energy generation in the arid and semi-arid areas. To date, approximately 3 billion of corruptly acquired assets have either been recovered or preserved for recovery. No previous governments have gone this far in the fight against corruption. Mr. Speaker, to further fight graft, late last year and early this month, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta assented to the Bribery Act 2016 and the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Amendment Act 2017, respectively. This introduced tough sanctions against individuals guilty of economic crimes. Mr. Speaker, our support to devolution is clear. In financial year 2017-2018, the National Treasury will be supporting county government to enhance their own sources of revenue, thereby strengthening their ability to offer better services to the public. To this, a policy has been finalized together with a legislative framework, which I intend to submit to Parliament shortly. Mr. Speaker, in 2017-2018, we are providing to the counties 291.1 billion as shareable revenue and another 38 billion conditional allocations, which include support from our development partners. Mr. Speaker, this brings the total allocation to the county government to 329.3 billion, which is equivalent to 35.2% of the most recently audited revenue approved by the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, our National Development Blueprint Vision 2030 envisioned a nation that's moving to the future as one. In this budget, we have provided 410 million to the National Cohesion and Integration Commission and 106 million to the National Integration under the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination. Mr. Speaker, in the next financial year, the government will continue to cut unnecessary expenditure and keep government spending under control. To improve the implementation and absorption capacity of projects and cap non-priority expenditures, we have issued guidelines on how capital projects should be planned, appraised, and evaluated before funds are finally committed in the budget. In addition, Mr. Speaker, to ensure prudent management of resources, the National Treasury is now in a position to operationalize the Treasury single account starting July this year. Further, Mr. Speaker, to enhance public expenditure management, the National Treasury will review delivery processes such as transport services, financial and audit services in order to ensure value for money and efficiency in expenditure management. Mr. Speaker, in his State of Nation address, His Excellency the President Uhuru Kenyatta emphasized the need to trim the public sector wage bill and support the recommendation of the SRC, which seeks to reduce the salaries and allowances of state officers. We urge all stakeholders to support the work of SRC and ensure full implementation of the recommendation. Mr. Speaker, beginning July 2017, salaries and allowances of all public servants will be harmonized as per the guidelines provided by the SRC following the job evaluation exercise, which resulted in an upward review of salaries of teachers, doctors, and public officers. We have set aside 20 billion in this budget to implement the first phase of the new review cycle of SRC amounting to 84 billion in 4 years. In addition, and in the spirit of controlling the growth of wage bill, new recruitments will remain frozen except for limited technical staff, security personnel, teachers, and health workers. Mr. Speaker, these actions will release funds for priority social sectors and critical infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the government is in the process of improving the public procurement and asset disposal system with the aim of managing our resources in an effective, efficient manner as provided for in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015 came into force on 7th January 2016. Following this, and with the aim of strengthening the realization of the key principles and pillars of integrity, transparency, and accountability in public procurement and asset system, we have now finalized development of regulations and the code of ethics for suppliers of the national and county government. Mr. Speaker, with the new code of ethics, we expect accountability on the part of those who do business with the government to be enhanced. This includes the private sector who have not been subjected to the same parameters as state and public officers in the fight against corruption until the recent enactment of the Bribery Act of 2016. Mr. Speaker, the code is complementary to an earlier code issued to guide the activities of public officers responsible for procurement and disposal processes. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the Code of Ethics, I will soon gazette the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Regulations 2017. These regulations aim at facilitating procurement at both levels of government. Mr. Speaker, about 75.3% of Kenyans now have access to financial services, a massive growth from 26.7% in 2006. This growth has been driven by mobile phone telephony. Today, more Kenyans buy goods and services and pay their bills conveniently using their phones. Mr. Speaker, the banking sector remains largely profitable with capital adequacy and liquidity ratios above the recommended threshold, thus giving assurance to Kenyans that their money is in safe hands. Mr. Speaker, over the last 1.5 years, some commercial banks experienced challenges and were put either under statutory management or liquidation. Following this and the emergence of a new financial risk in the sector, the Central Bank of Kenya adopted a broad surveillance strategy to stabilize the sector around 3 pillars. 1, increasing transparency on shareholding. 2, strengthening banks' corporate governance. And 3, ensuring banks adopt effective business models that will ensure resilience. Further, Mr. Speaker, the CBK has continued to strengthen its supervision of the industry by increasing its supervisory staff component, also working closely with the international partners to enhance supervisory staff capacity and rolling out on-site risk-based anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism inspections for commercial banks and microfinance banks. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the Banking Act 2016 on capping interest rates has reduced the bank lending rates and increased deposit rates offered to savers. The maximum lending rate now stands at 14%, while interest earned from deposits are now remunerated at 7%. Mr. Speaker, to progressively reduce the interest rate spread, we shall continue to implement reform in this sector that were adopted under the Committee on Cost of Credit that I chaired in 2014. Mr. Speaker, together with the Kenya Bankers Association and the Central Bank, we are undertaking a comprehensive assessment of the impact of the interest rate cap law to assess its impact on credit expansion to the private sector, which has slowed from double-digit level a year ago to single-digit level, and the perceived impact on economic growth. The assessment will inform any intervention measures to be taken to ensure credit availability to the consumers. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to address the high cost of credit and expand access to credit in the economy. To this end, the Movable Property Security Rights Bill 2016 was recently approved by the National Assembly, should facilitate lower lending rates as it provides for borrowing using movable assets. Mr. Speaker, the Nairobi International Financial Center Bill was approved by Cabinet in December 2016 and has been submitted to the National Assembly for approval. The enactment of this bill will kickstart the establishment of Nairobi International Financial Center to position Nairobi as an international financial hub. Mr. Speaker, Financial Services Authority Bill, which proposes to merge all non-bank financial sector regulators, is currently undergoing legal drafting, and I will soon be submitting it to this House for approval. Mr. Speaker, Islamic financing arrangement is becoming a major source of funding development expenditures worldwide. This financial arrangement is getting integrated within the global financial system and has potential to boost prosperity and raise the standard of living of our people. Kenya intends to maximize its comparative advantage and position itself as a regional hub for Islamic financial products in order to attract foreign direct investment. I will therefore propose legislative amendments to the Capital Markets Authority, the Cooperative Societies Act, and the SACCOs Societies Act to facilitate for Sharia-compliant financial products. In addition, I intend to amend the Public Financial Management Act to provide for issuance of Sukuk bond as an alternative source of financing our development projects. I also intend to amend the tax statutes to provide for equivalent tax treatment of these new financial products with the conventional financial products. In addition, I shall shortly be issuing regulations to facilitate development of takaful retirement benefit schemes in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, the insurance industry in Kenya is restructuring into groups to enhance their capital base as well as take advantage of economies of scale and maximize on the expertise which is scarce. Currently, there are more than 10 such insurance groups operating in Kenya, and there is no sufficient legal and regulatory framework to ensure effective supervision. This implies that their interrelated risks are not monitored. In this regard, I propose to amend the Insurance Act to enhance supervision of insurance groups in Kenya and ensure financial stability in the sector. Mr. Speaker, annual licensing of financial institutions is time-consuming as no longer necessary in this area of risk-based supervision. Accordingly, the government amended the Banking Act in 2015 to provide for perpetual licensing. In 2016, the same was extended to institutions licensed by the Retirement Benefit Authority. In this regard, I propose to amend the Insurance Act to further provide for perpetual licensing of insurers. However, the intermediaries such as insurance brokers, loss assessors, among others, will continue to be issued with annual licensing. Mr. Speaker, with our economy increasingly becoming dynamic, some employers are opting to operate under a common umbrella retirement benefit scheme that provides retirement benefit to their employees, unlike the current standalone retirement benefit schemes provided by employers for their own employees. A scheme covering employees from several employers has unique features that differ from ordinary occupation schemes and therefore needs a proper legal framework to regulate its operation. In this regard, the umbrella retirement benefit scheme regulations have been prepared to govern the operations of these type of schemes. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is widely known for innovation in financial inclusion. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, last year, Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO and the co-financier of the social network site Facebook, visited Kenya to meet with the entrepreneurs and developers and learn how our M-Pesa works and how it has transformed the lives of ordinary Kenyans. Well, Mr. Speaker, we have done it again. Last week, Mr. Speaker, I launched a special limited offer of the M-Akiba bond worth 150 million. This is a retail bond issued by the government of Kenya and can be bought and sold via the mobile phone platform. The tax-free M-Akiba bond aims at promoting a savings and investment culture by Kenyans with a minimum investment amount of 3,000 and a maximum investment amount of 140,000 Kenya shillings per day. Mr. Speaker, now Wanjiku will be able to invest at 3,000 or above with no risk to our money and at higher interest rates than those offered by the banks. I therefore invite all Kenyans to invest in the bond, whose money will be used to fund infrastructure projects to further develop our country and move towards achieving our Vision 2030 development goals. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to report that as of this morning, a total of 68,399 Kenyans had registered with a total buys of 79 million Kenya shillings. This is more than half of the figure on offer of 150 million within just 1 week of the launch. So for those who have not registered and are yet to buy, please hurry up. Registering and investing is as simple as dialing *889#. Mr. Speaker, this new saving innovation is the first of its kind in the world, and to give it full weight it deserves, His Excellency the President will launch the main Akiba bond with an offer of 4.85 billion in June this year. I invite all of you to attend this historic occasion. Mr. Speaker, over the last 4 years, we have initiated a number of infrastructure projects, some of which have been completed while others are nearing completion. We are targeting to complete all ongoing projects so that Kenyans can realize the benefits of expanded infrastructure facilities. Mr. Speaker, work is being done to construct and maintain roads in order to ensure that Kenyans can move across the country with ease. Since 2013, the government has constructed 1,950 kilometers of new roads, and another 7,000 kilometers are under different phases of construction. Mr. Speaker, construction of the Outer Ring Road in Nairobi and the dualling of the Ngong Road are progressing well. To further enhance movement of Kenyans, ease transportation of goods, and reduce congestion on our roads, I have allocated a total of 134.9 billion, which includes 63.6 billion for ongoing road construction, 44.3 billion for foreign finance roads, and 27 billion for low-volume seal roads. Further, I have allocated 49.3 billion for road maintenance from the road maintenance levy. Mr. Speaker, we know that once completed, the standard gauge rail SGR will help to integrate domestic markets, link special industrial zones, and bring global export markets closer home. That's why we have started construction works for the second phase, Nairobi to Naivasha. The construction of the first phase is nearing completion, and Kenyans will soon enjoy a decent ride from Mombasa to Nairobi starting June 1st, 2017. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 75.6 billion for SGR, of which 15.5 billion will go to the completion of the first phase, and 59.7 billion will go to the construction of phase 2, and 400 million for the relocation of people along the railway line. Mr. Speaker, the first phase of the second container terminal at the Port of Mombasa is complete. This will improve cargo handling services at the port and strengthen Mombasa as a preferred port of call in East Africa. Mr. Speaker, to enhance service delivery in our ports, the government will continue to develop several commercial ports, including the Lamu Port, Kisumu Port, as well as other small ports along the coastline. In this budget, we have allocated 10 billion to the LAPSET project. We have also allocated 3.6 billion from our development partners for the Mombasa Port Development Project, and 200 million for the maintenance of ferries. Mr. Speaker, to further scale up the ongoing airport expansion and modernization, I have allocated 2.6 billion for upgrading of the Malindi, Isiolo, and Lokichogyo airports, and also Suneka airstrip. Going forward, the government plans to commence the expansion of the Eldoret International Airport to enable large cargo planes to land and position it as a transport hub. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are now paying less for their electricity owing to the increased power generation. Today, more than 2,282 megawatts of power is available on the national grid, compared to 1,664 megawatts available 3 years ago. With this additional power, Kenyan households and farms now have access to power, enabling them to conduct their business smoothly. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, I have allocated 16.4 billion to support exploitation of geothermal, wind, and solar resources that Kenya is endowed with. These resources are expected to increase the clean energy mix, cementing Kenya's position as world leader in renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, as promised by the Jubilee government, the number of households connected to electricity has increased due to the reduction of both connection time and cost. To date, more than 5 million households have been connected to power. An additional 14,045 primary schools have been connected to the power grid since 2013 to facilitate the digital literacy program, and 810 public institutions have been connected to alternative solar power. Mr. Speaker, to support electricity transmission and connection in the country, in this budget I have allocated 9.7 billion to last mile connectivity. We have also allocated 7.3 billion for electrification of public facilities, 3 billion for installation of transformers in constituencies, 3.1 billion for National Street Lighting Program, 1.3 billion for connectivity subsidy, and 1.5 billion for installation of solar lanterns. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to support the exploration and distribution of oil and gas in the country. Accordingly, in this budget, I have allocated 3.8 billion for the exploration and distribution of oil and gas. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to target high-priority infrastructure projects that maximize the welfare of Kenyans. Some of these projects will be funded by donors or under the public-private partnership PPP arrangement. Mr. Speaker, although we continue to allocate significant resources in the budget for infrastructure development, the funds are never enough to finance infrastructure development. The PPP arrangement, as well as donors, will help to cover the existing infrastructure funding gap in energy generation, road expansion, and construction of hostels for various training institutions, construction of affordable housing in urban centers, and the management of our solid waste. Mr. Speaker, as earlier indicated, the theme for this year's budget is creating jobs, delivering a better life for all Kenyans. Under this budget, under this budget, we intend to provide incentives that will create more jobs for our youth. In the past few years, manufacturing as a share of GDP has stagnated between 10 and 11%. We target to position manufacturing to become a key driver of our economy as mentioned in our Vision 2030. Mr. Speaker, over the last 4 years, we have laid down a solid foundation for industrialization with our economic transformation agenda. We firmly believe that it is the right time for Kenyans to solidly move to middle income status. Therefore, some of the incentives I will be pronouncing today are aimed at revamping certain industries, encouraging establishment of new ones, and scaling up production in others. Additionally, on this path towards industrialization, we will continue to support the leather, textile and apparels, the pharmaceuticals, and extractive industries in a manner that leverages the labor-absorbing characteristics of these sectors. Mr. Speaker, to further promote the development of industries, I have allocated a total of 1.6 billion for the leather industrial park development and textile development. To support the revival of our industries, I have set aside 450 million for modernization of Rotich. In addition, we are finalizing an export credit facility from India of $30 million to further equip Rotich. India Exim Bank has also provided a line of credit to Industrial Development Bank for on-lending to SMEs activities. We have also provided 250 million for modernization of new KCC to make it a strategic milk processor. Mr. Speaker, with the Special Economic Zone Authority fully operational, the government has started rolling out special economic zones in key urban areas including Mombasa, Lamu, Kisumu, as part of the Vision 2030 goal to diversify manufacturing activities, create employment, and boost Kenya's investment profile. Under the special economic zones, the government will provide a host of incentives for industries to operate in and boost creation of modern urban centers. These incentives include exemptions on VAT, reduced corporate tax rates for a defined period, access to quality infrastructure, and one-stop shop for licensing. Once operational, the special economic zones will further facilitate importation of necessary raw materials and exporting of finished goods, and thriving of agro-industrial activities, and allowing for access to regional market. Mr. Speaker, to add value to our agricultural produce, the government will focus on the agro-processing industries that will brand our tea, coffee, floriculture, horticulture, dairy, and fruit products and textile. This will not only create jobs, but will ensure our exports remain competitive in the global market. Furthermore, Kenya will increase our low-cost manufacture of basic industries and textiles for export to the region to exploit the opportunities within AGOA initiatives, as well as focus on new markets in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Mr. Speaker, as a result of measures implemented in the recent past, Kenya has seen the return of investors into the automobile industry. These have included Volkswagen, Peugeot, Toyota, and others. Indeed, the establishment of technical training and technology transfer mechanism as part of reinvigorating of the sector is a key building blocks. We do not want to lose the momentum gain. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the government, in close engagement with stakeholders, will complete the development of the comprehensive automobile industry development policy for Kenya and finalize an actionable 10-year automotive industry development plan. With this intervention, the government will be setting the automobile industry on a firm footing in order to enable it grow and create employment opportunities for the youth in Kenya and the region at large. Mr. Speaker, the importance of agriculture in contributing to the growth of the economy and generation of jobs and income cannot be overstated. The government also recognizes that without a strong, vibrant agricultural sector, a critical component of our industrialization strategy, namely agro-processing, will not be achieved. Since 2013, the Jubilee government has been initiating measures to cushion the agricultural sector, mechanize it, and ensure it contribute to food security for all Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, to reduce the dependency on rain-fed agriculture and ensure food security, the government has rehabilitated and expanded national irrigation schemes by more than 27,000 acres between 2013 and 2016. Mr. Speaker, to further support the ongoing irrigation projects countrywide, I have allocated 6.3 billion for this purpose. This includes 0.9 billion towards Bura irrigation scheme, 2.1 billion for Mwea irrigation project, 0.6 billion for Galana Kulalo, 2.2 billion for National Expanded Irrigation Program, 0.2 billion for smallholder irrigation program, and 300 million for community-based irrigation projects. Mr. Speaker, to help our farmers edge against adverse weather conditions last year, the government piloted insurance schemes for crops and livestock in various counties. Indeed, thousands of farmers in these counties benefited from the premium subsidy at a total cost of 452 million. In addition, many livestock farmers received compensation under the scheme after their herds were depleted by the drought. Mr. Speaker, to support the crop and livestock insurance scheme, I have allocated 700 million in this budget. Mr. Speaker, our farmers now have access to fertilizer and inputs at affordable rates. Since 2013, the government has distributed more than 500,000 tons of subsidized fertilizer to our farmers, cutting prices and improving productivity. 2 fertilizer blending plants have been established with an annual capacity of 300,000 tons. Mr. Speaker, in order to improve yield and further reduce cost of inputs for our farmers, I have set aside 4.1 billion to subsidize fertilizer. Mr. Speaker, to enable the country maintain adequate food reserves and ensure productivity of our lands, I have allocated 1.3 billion for the strategic grain reserves and 100 million for mechanization of agriculture. To diversify our agriculture, I have allocated 1 billion for the revival of the pyrethrum, 100 million for the revival of the pyrethrum sector, and for the Mira farmers, I have set aside 1 billion Kenya shillings. To enhance service delivery in the land subsector, I have set aside 1.6 billion for issuance of title deeds and 900 million for digitalization of land registries. Mr. Speaker, the tourism sector has picked up with significant rise in the conference activities and foreign tourist arrival. To further realize the multiple benefit of a robust tourism sector, the government, working with the key shareholders in the industry, will continue to promote and develop new areas of tourism, including sports, beach and medical tourism. The Tourism Regulatory Authority, TRA, has also been established to ensure proper conduct of tourism service providers and bring order to the industry. Mr. Speaker, to further support this sector, I have allocated 1 billion for tourism recovery, 1 billion for sustaining new markets and sitting booths, 600 million for capital lending to hoteliers, and 100 million for restoration of Fort Jesus. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the importance of aviation to the economy, FDI, tourism, and other linkages, the government is keen to keep the positive trajectory that has been achieved at Kenya Airways and is working with other shareholders to ensure that the ongoing efforts to restructure the KQ balance sheet and place the company on a long-term sound financial footing is achieved. In this regard, the government will play a critical role in providing the necessary support and bringing other key stakeholders together to achieve a successful turnaround of Kenya Airways. Mr. Speaker, the mining sector is a key driver for job creation. Thousands of jobs have been created during the exploration and processing of minerals, with more indirect jobs created for off-site suppliers and services. With additional 20 other minerals identified and the endorsement of the new Mining Act 2016, the sector is poised to immensely contribute to the development of industries, wealth, and job creation. Mr. Speaker, to harness the potential of this sector, I have set aside 200 million for geological mapping and mineral exploration, 150 million for geological data bank, 103 million for mineral certification laboratory, 140 million for mineral audit support, and a further 140 million for acquisition of survey equipment. We expect a further 6 billion support from China for geomapping once discussions are concluded. Mr. Speaker, early oil exploitation from Turkana oil field will start soon. This will be transported via roads, and plans are finalized to construct an oil pipeline from Lodwar to Lamu. Very soon, Kenya will join the League of Oil Exporting Nations. Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the potential of the blue economy. To facilitate the development of the blue economy, the government has commissioned construction of offshore patrol boats to deter illegal fishing activities along the shores of our waters, which deny the country an estimated 10 billion shillings annually. Plans are also underway to develop designated fish ports at the coast to facilitate landing of the catch by deep sea fishing vessels. 400 million has been set aside for this purpose. Mr. Speaker, to further support the development of the blue economy, I have allocated 300 million for aquaculture technology development and innovation transfers. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has great potential to leverage its marine resources for purposes of creating wealth and employment. In this effort, the government proposes a coastal fisheries revival package to facilitate primary, secondary, and auxiliary marine fisheries processing and production. This package will include strengthened enforcement measures to curb illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in Kenya's exclusive economic zone, and support for a robust national Eat More Fish campaign. I will later propose tax incentive to support the blue economy. Mr. Speaker, the Jubilee government promised to connect every county to fiber optic technology and improve service delivery through the use of ICT in order to ease access to information by all Kenyans. Today, every county headquarters is connected to the fiber optics, raising the number of internet users. As a result, Kenyans access government services through Huduma centers and other digital platforms with ease at a reduced cost. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance service delivery by government agencies, I have set aside 300 million for single window support project and 150 million for continued rollout of IFMIS to counties. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is set to benefit from the establishment of the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST, at Konza Technopolis with the support of South Korea. The establishment in Kenya of this world-class science and technology research university will enhance the quality of higher learning while nurturing the technological advanced population producing creative young talents. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 600 million to development at Konsa Technopolis. Mr. Speaker, Kenya remains a water-scarce country with water coverage of about 58%, sewerage of 25%, and less than 1,000 cubic meters per capita of renewable freshwater resources. Mr. Speaker, to bridge the water gap, several water supply projects were completed in the last financial year, among them Narok, Masinga, Kitui, Mau Phase 1, Kisumu, Mombasa Lot 1, Nyahururu, Othaya, Mukurweni, Lamu Island, further giving access to clean water to 950,000 people. On water storage, Mr. Speaker, the government has completed Kiserian Dam, while the construction of Intare Dam, targeted to serve Nakuru County, is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance and sustain measures to control floods, harvest rain, and stock water, I have allocated a total of 36.7 billion for water resource management, water and sewerage infrastructure development, dam construction, national water harvesting, and groundwater exploitation, and 500 million for water for schools. Mr. Speaker, in recent times, Kenyans in many parts of the country have faced severe drought, resulting in crop failure and water shortages. The government has released funds to relevant implementing ministries to undertake drought mitigation measures. Specifically, the national government has disbursed a total of 7.3 billion, while the county government has provided 2 billion Kenya shillings to cater for the doubling of food rations, cash transfers, scaling up of water tracking and storage of people, livestock and wildlife, distribution of water bowsers, repair and rehabilitation of boreholes, and fuel subsidy for boreholes. Mr. Speaker, the plan to develop 20,000 new housing for the police is underway. I have allocated 1.4 billion for the construction of 1,500 housing units for police and Kenya prisons in Nairobi. Under an initial phase involving the private sector using alternative building materials, we intend to scale up this with the funding support from African Development Bank in collaboration with other partners. Further, Mr. Speaker, in the last budget statement, I introduced corporate tax incentives to encourage investors to enter into the housing sector by reducing the corporate tax rate for developers who construct at least 4,000 units per year. This was meant to provide more decent low-cost housing for the fast-growing demand for houses in the urban areas. I call upon investors to take up this incentive and construct the much-needed houses for our people. Meanwhile, we will shortly be unveiling a comprehensive housing package that will incentivize the private sector to invest in low-cost housing. Mr. Speaker, to ensure civil servants acquire decent housing, I have allocated 1.5 billion for the Civil Servant Housing Scheme Fund. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to mitigate the impact of climate change, having signed the protocol on climate change following the adoption of the Paris Agreement. The government will continue to mainstream climate change measures into all its projects and programs. Mr. Speaker, through the Gazette notice dated March 14, 2017, the government banned the use, manufacture, and importation of all plastic bags for commercial and household packaging beginning September 2017. As you are all aware, plastic paper bags have been categorized as a leading cause of poor drainage and environmental degradation. With this ban, we aim to address these challenges and preserve our environment. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, to further support environmental conservation, I have allocated 3.8 billion for environment management and protection and 2.2 billion for meteorological services. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to enhance enrollment and increase capitation for free primary and secondary education. As directed by His Excellency the President when receiving the results of 2016 KCSE exams, and in an effort to enhance efficiency in the utilization of resources, the government is speeding up the implementation of the Education Information Management System to ensure that education data in the country is accurate, up-to-date, and available. Further, Mr. Speaker, and as from this year, the Kenya National Examination Council, as directed by the President, will cease the use of index numbers and instead ensure all registered examination candidates have unique personal identifier, UPIs, in student registration numbers, and that they will use throughout their education life. Mr. Speaker, to further support this initiative, we have provided $4 billion for examination fee waiver for all Class 8 and Form 4 candidates who will be sitting for the Kenya National Examination exams. Mr. Speaker, the Jubilee government promised to provide both the free primary and free day secondary education to all our children. To further support this program, I have allocated $14 billion for the free primary education program and $33 billion for the free day secondary education program. In order to minimize absenteeism of students from schools, which affects their academic performance, particularly in arid and semi-arid areas, I have set aside $2.5 billion for the school feeding program. Additionally, I have allocated $500 million to support the provision of sanitary towels to our girls in schools. To further increase the ratio of our teacher to student, I have set aside $2 billion for the recruitment of additional teachers. Mr. Speaker, all these interventions in the education sector also have a significant and direct impact on the cost of living for many Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, as promised by the Jubilee administration, the government has rolled out the digital literacy program to public primary schools across the country. The government targets to finish distributing the remaining ones before the end of this year. To further entrench digital literacy among our children and cover the remainder of the pupils across the country, I have allocated $13.4 billion for deployment of digital devices to schools. Mr. Speaker, to further support the development in our secondary schools, I have allocated $300 billion for the upgrading of national schools. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's education system is highly ranked regionally and globally. This means Kenya has strengthened in its talent pool and could leverage to attract investors as well as become a strong exporter of talent in the region. Indeed, the ongoing curriculum review efforts, which shifts to a competency-based framework, is an essential part of the drive for retaining Kenya's competitive human resource advantage. Towards this end, the government will concentrate on improving the technical, vocational training and university quality, attracting and retaining the best talent, producing job market-ready talent domestically and for the world. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, 60 technical and vocational training colleges have been constructed with an additional 70 TVC still under construction and expected to be completed by June 2017. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the government is also in the process of equipping the existing institutions with appropriate training equipment. To further support the growth of technical institutions in the country, I have allocated $600 million for technical, vocational education and training in this budget. As we forge towards industrialization, the technical training institutes will become indispensable for developing skills needed in the industrial sector. Mr. Speaker, enrollment in our universities, both public and private, has risen, owing to, among others, the establishment of the Kenya universities and colleges' central placement services, which has ensured equitable placement of learners in both public and private universities as well as colleges, a departure from the past where central admissions were the preserves of public universities. Acknowledging the importance of university education, I have provided $83.8 billion for university education. Further, Mr. Speaker, to enable our students finance their university education, I have allocated $10.1 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to implement programs to ensure Kenya have access to safe, quality, and cost-effective health services. So far, we have witnessed significant reduction in communicable diseases, maternal and infant deaths, and improvement in the immunization coverage, as well as increased access to ARVs. Mr. Speaker, to further improve immunization coverage and increase access to ARVs, I have allocated 0.7 billion for vaccines and 0.6 billion to the National AIDS Control Council. Mr. Speaker, to bring specialized medical care closer to the Kenyans, we have equipped hospitals with specialized medical equipment. Mr. Speaker, we have set aside 5 billion for leasing of more medical equipment. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the national government, in partnership with the county government, have successfully implemented free maternity program and equipped more than 200 theaters for emergency surgery during delivery. As a result, the number of women delivering in health facilities has increased from 660,000 to 1.2 million annually. Subsequently, maternal deaths have dropped from 6,000 to 4,000 annually, thus keeping an additional 2,000 mothers alive to nurture their children and families. Mr. Speaker, to further support the free maternal health care program, I have allocated 4.3 billion in this budget. Mr. Speaker, as a further indication to the government's commitment to improve health service delivery, I have allocated 2.7 billion to doctors, clinical officers, nurses internship program, 9 billion for Kenyatta National Hospital, 6.2 billion for Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, 2 billion for Kenya Medical Research Institute, 700 million for cancer services, and 3.9 billion for Kenya Medical Training College, KMTC. Mr. Speaker, the Jubilee government promised to expand access to affordable health care. Since 2013, the number of Kenyans who access outpatient medical care through the National Housing Insurance Funds have increased by more than 2 million. To further expand access to affordable health care, I have allocated 0.9 billion for free primary health care, 0.3 billion for health insurance subsidy program for the elderly and disabled, and 1.1 billion for the rollout of universal health care coverage. Mr. Speaker, to alleviate poverty and ensure that the economic growth we are experiencing is shared, thousands of our orphans and vulnerable children, people living with disability and elderly in our society, have continued to receive cash transfers from the National Safety Net program. To further support the plight of the less disadvantaged in the society, combat poverty and promote equity, the social protection safety nets have been enhanced as follows: 9.6 billion for orphaned and vulnerable children, OVC, 7.9 billion for cash transfers to the elderly persons, 1.2 billion for cash transfers to persons with severe disabilities, and 400 million for National Development Fund for persons with disability. Mr. Speaker, given the experience of the cash transfer program to the elderly, the government has decided to enhance coverage of the cash transfer program to fully cover all old persons above the age of 70 years. I therefore propose that beginning January 2018, all persons above the age of 70 years will receive a cash transfer in the form of monthly stipend and NHIF cover that will be paid by the government. Old age persons covered under the existing over 65 years, targeting people with disability, will be continued. Mr. Speaker, this policy is an indication that the government cares for the senior citizens in our society. In addition, Mr. Speaker, to support the less fortunate families, I have set aside 300 million for the rehabilitation of street families, 500 million for Child Welfare Society, and 400 million for the Presidential Secondary School Bursary Scheme. Further, I have set aside 3.5 billion for the Kenya Anger Safety Net Program, 700 million for emergency relief, and 7.7 billion for the Equalization Fund. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to the completion of the ongoing economic stimulus projects to support services delivery at the constituency level. Accordingly, I have set aside 100 million for the completion of ESPs, 250 million for the completion of the constituency industrial development centers, In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside 2.1 billion for affirmative action to promote equity and for social development. I have also set aside 30.9 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, since 2013, over 100,000 community youths have been engaged in various development programs in the National Youth Service. Also, over 25 billion has been cumulatively availed through the Wezo Fund, Women and Youth Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, over 26 billion worth of tenders have been awarded under the Access to Government Procurement Opportunities Platform, commonly known as AGBO. These interventions demonstrate the commitment to empower our youth for their future prosperity. Mr. Speaker, to continue supporting our youth and women, I am allocating 18.3 billion towards the Youth Empowerment Program, which will help facilitate mentoring of youth on leadership, national values, and entrepreneurial skills, and further entrench digital literacy. In addition, I am allocating 600 million for Youth Enterprise Development Fund, 0.7 billion for Youth Employment and Enterprise Wezo Fund, and 800 million for Women Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, going forward, we shall review all the existing distinct funds to ensure that there is no duplication and make them more relevant to today's youth requirement. Mr. Speaker, in order to operationalize the constitutional requirement under Article 227, the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015 provided for preference and reservation clauses that offer the disadvantaged groups an express opportunity to competitively participate in the public procurement without discrimination. The preference and reservations aimed at promoting the local industries and enhancing participation by disadvantaged groups in public procurement. Mr. Speaker, we are at an advanced stage of establishing the Preference and Reservation Secretariat, which will oversee the implementation of preference and reservations as provided for in the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act to advance the interests of the youth, women, persons living with disability, and other disadvantaged groups in public procurement. Mr. Speaker, the Secretariat will expand the monitoring and evaluation exercise to cover all procuring entities, including the county governments. In order to ensure the target groups are benefiting from doing business with the government, the Secretariat will, among other responsibilities, focus on monitoring to ensure that prompt payments are made for duly executed contracts to these disadvantaged groups under the preference and reservations. Mr. Speaker, the Secretariat is expected to link small and medium enterprise owned by the disadvantaged groups with the procuring entities through its mandate. Further, it's expected to ensure that preference in public procurement are extended to candidates offering goods locally manufactured, assembled, mined, extracted, or grown in Kenya. For purposes of ensuring sustainable promotion of local industries, all foreign tenderers participating in the international tenders will be expected to source at least 40% of their supplies from the Kenyan citizen contractors. This will enhance the competitiveness of the SMEs, spur economic growth, and enhance job creation, which will help in addressing the unemployment challenge. This, Mr. Speaker, will not only add more jobs to the youth and women, but will also provide further impetus to our objective of industrialization. Mr. Speaker, to enhance the implementation of the tax incentive for employers who engage apprentices, last year I proposed to gazette some regulations. Since then, the government has developed the regulations for implementation of the incentives. Mr. Speaker, the ongoing youth training and internship program will enhance the employability of Kenyan youth and increase income opportunities. This program targets a total of 70,000 youths aged between 16 and 29 years who are unemployed with up to Form 4 level education and will avail training and work experience to them in the real workplace. Mr. Speaker, in order to constructively engage the youth, the government will focus on creating opportunities for the youth and help them to realize their potential through sports, culture, and arts. In this respect, there will be sporting activities at the counties to identify and nurture talent in sports. The government will provide opportunities for participation in culture and artistic talents, and will support the preservation and promotion of our national heritage. Mr. Speaker, the government has over the last 4 years trained and nurtured more than 73,700 talented youth in various sports disciplines, sensitized 694 persons, and tested 231 athletes on anti-doping. The government has further enhanced film monitoring and enforcement by issuing 1,043 film regulatory licenses and conducted 5,753 random inspections to ensure inappropriate content is not distributed to the public. Mr. Speaker, through the proposed National Sports, Culture and Arts Fund, the government will further continue to develop sports, arts, and preserve our national heritage. The government will upgrade 5 regional stadia in Kamarin, Chuka, Karatu, Darugu, I hope I've pronounced that right, Marsabit, and Wote. In addition, the government will continue to improve compliance with sports regulation, increase awareness on the fight against doping, and disseminate heritage knowledge. Further, the government will complete the ultra-modern National Library at Hapa Hill in Nairobi and fully operationalize the Kenya Film School. Mr. Speaker, to further support this initiative, I have allocated 200 million for the construction of Sports Academy and 550 million for the completion of the ultra-modern National Library. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the financial projections for the 2017-2018 budget. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the 2016-2017 budget has progressed well, but with challenges. We have had to deal with the various challenges such as the ongoing drought, the various strikes, security, and preparation of the 2017 general elections, and additional expenditures for projects financed by development partners. In the course of the year, we had to make adjustments in the context of Supplementary 1 to accommodate these emerging pressures. The results of the additional expenditures was a higher fiscal deficit of about 9% of GDP, financed partly by external financing from the development partners. Mr. Speaker, our fiscal policy for 2017-2018 aims to support rapid and inclusive economic growth while ensuring sustainable debt position. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, we have taken a deliberate path of fiscal consolidation, which reduces the fiscal deficit, including grants, from around 9% of GDP in this current financial year to about 4% of GDP in 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, we will maintain strong revenue efforts by bolstering our tax administration procedures to minimize revenue leakages and leverage on information technology. In the next financial year budget, in the 2017-2018 budget, revenue collection, including appropriation in aid, is projected at 1.7 trillion, equivalent to 19.6% of GDP. Of this, ordinary revenue is projected at 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings, or 17.8% of GDP. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, total expenditure and net lending in this budget are projected at 2.287 trillion, equivalent to 26.3% of GDP. Of this, the current expenditure will amount to 1.3 billion, equivalent to 15.5% of GDP, while development expenditure is projected at 640 billion, equivalent to 7.4% of GDP. In addition, 5 billion has been set aside as contingency to cater for unforeseen expenditures. Mr. Speaker, this means that the fiscal deficit for 2017-2018 will be 524.6 billion, equivalent to 6% of GDP, and will be financed through borrowing from both external and domestic sources. The net external financing will amount to 256 billion, or 2.9% of GDP, and will be mainly on concessional terms. Non-concessional external borrowing will be limited to projects with viable expected returns and the ceiling in the medium-term debt strategy. The domestic financing of the budget will therefore comprise of 268.6 billion, equivalent to 3.1% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, the rest of my budget presentation outlines various tax measures I intend to introduce through the Finance Bill 2017 to create jobs and better the lives of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, as earlier indicated in this statement, we consulted other partner states in East Africa, and we agreed Kenya could proceed with an early presentation of the budget. However, regarding matters relating to customs, we have evaluated various proposals from stakeholders for consideration by the East African Ministers for Finance during the pre-budget consultation meeting to be held in May this year. Mr. Speaker, measures that will be agreed upon by the EAC Ministers for Finance on matters relating to customs will be communicated through the East African EAC Gazette and implemented from 1st July this year. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, the EAC Common External Tariff, which sets out the rates of duty applicable on imported goods, is undergoing a comprehensive review, and the final outcome will be released once adopted by the East African Community Council of Ministers. Mr. Speaker, the custom proposals contain measures to promote industrialization, encourage local investment, create incentives in the agricultural and manufacturing sectors in order to make our products more competitive so as to protect local industries from cheap imports which create unfair competition. Mr. Speaker, the government has noted the huge potential for growth in the paint and resin manufacturing industry for matching the high demand in the construction industry. Illuminating kerosene is a critical input in this sector. So as to promote paint and resin manufacturing, I propose to amend the Excise Duty Act to allow refund of excise duty paid on illuminating kerosene used in the manufacturing of paints and resin by registered manufacturers. Mr. Speaker, the VAT Act 2013 introduced 16% VAT on all imported inputs for pest control products for local processing formulation, while the imported finished products remain zero rated. This treatment has made locally manufactured pesticides more expensive than the imported products. In order to promote local manufacturers and reduce the cost of production in agricultural sector, I propose to exempt VAT on all inputs used in the manufacture of pesticides. Mr. Speaker, the tourism industry has been growing steadily despite adversities experienced in the industries. In order to promote tourism further and to make Kenya a tourism hub, I propose to exempt from VAT locally assembled tourist vehicles. This measure has taken into consideration the current policy of the government to encourage local motor vehicles assembly. Tourist operators will therefore be encouraged to buy tourist vehicles locally. Mr. Speaker, during the 2016 budget speech, I proposed measures to promote the health sector by exempting the VAT taxable goods used for the construction of specialized hospitals with accommodation. This was a noble initiative on the part of the government in order to promote health sector. Mr. Speaker, I have noted that this incentive excluded medical equipment and apparatus, making it unattractive to investors. In order to address the challenges in the health sector, I propose to extend the incentives earlier granted by exempting from VAT medical equipment and apparatus for use in the specialized hospitals. Mr. Speaker, I have proposed changes in the Capital Markets Act and Public Financial Management Act to accommodate Islamic finance products to enhance financial deepening. Consequently, I further propose to amend the tax statutes to provide for equivalent tax treatment of these products with the conventional financial products. To support the blue economy, Mr. Speaker, I propose to allow a 150% investment deduction allowance for capital expenditures in this sector. I'm also proposing to exempt from VAT packaging materials and other inputs intended to support primary, secondary, and ancillary marine fisheries and fish processing, and a 50% reduction in port charges for fisheries vessels. On measures to reduce income inequality, Mr. Speaker, last year I extended the tax ban by 10% and increased the personal relief by 10%. This year, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to expand the tax ban by another 10% and to increase the relief by 10%. This will increase the number of low-income earners exempt from tax by raising the lowest taxable income from $11,135 per month to $13,486 per month. This measure will, to a large extent, increase the take-home income of a majority of our low-income earners. In addition, I wish to confirm that the exemption on bonuses, overtime, and retirement benefits paid to low-income earners will remain. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is positioning itself as a hub for motor vehicle assembly for the region. In order to enhance this position, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to reduce the corporate rate of tax for new assemblers from 30% to 15% for the first 5 years. This measure will enhance the return for new investors and increase job opportunities for Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, it is the government policy to promote foreign direct investment so as to expand the local economy and increase employment opportunities. To this end, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to exempt dividends payable to non-residents by enterprises operating in special economic zones in order to ensure that foreign investors get a good return for their investment. In addition, I propose to reduce the withholding tax on interest payable to non-residents by special economic zones enterprises from 15% to 5%. Mr. Speaker, I also propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow enterprises licensed under the special economic zone to deduct 100% of the investment cost of building and machinery. This will enable such enterprises to recover cost of investment within the first year of utilization. Mr. Speaker, I further propose to amend the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act to exempt from export duty and import declaration fee, respectively, goods exported to and imported by enterprises licensed under the Special Economic Zone Act. These measures are meant to reduce the cost of doing business, inspire foreign direct investment, position Kenya as a premier business hub, and increase employment opportunities. Mr. Speaker, betting and gaming have become widespread in our society in an environment that is inadequately regulated. Its expansion is beginning to have negative consequences, negative social effects, in particular on the youth and the vulnerable members of our society. I therefore propose to raise taxes for betting, lottery, gaming, and competition from the current rates of 7.5%, 5%, 12%, 15% respectively, to a uniform tax of 50% for all categories. Mr. Speaker, all the proceeds of this will be put in a newly created National Sports, Culture and Arts Fund to support development of sports, culture, and arts in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, following the enactment of the VAT Act 2013, it was important that regulations be adopted to support the smooth implementation of the Act. The VAT regulations have been prepared and subjected to stakeholder engagement as required. The regulations have been aligned to the Tax Procedure Act 2015, which consolidated procedures that are common into one legislation. I will therefore be publishing the VAT regulations to support the smooth implementation of the VAT Act 2013. Mr. Speaker, we have received a number of proposals for consideration during the review of the Income Tax Act. Among the issues received for review include taxation of capital gains, compensating tax, taxation of pensions, taxation of extractive industries, and taxation of cross-border transactions, among others. We intend to address these issues during the overhaul of the current income tax, which we have already commenced, and we should be completing this in 1 or 2 months' time. Mr. Speaker, the draft Income Tax Act is expected to be published shortly for public input in accordance with the Constitution. Specifically, the new Income Tax Act is expected not only to simplify the administration of the Act, but also to reduce the cost of compliance by the taxpayers. The review is also guided by the need to expand the tax base and to align the Act with the best practice and ensure certainty in the tax law. Mr. Speaker, last year, I introduced tax amnesty for taxpayers willing to reinvest back home, provided there was a conducive environment to facilitate such reinvestment. I have noted that there is need to clarify the circumstances under which the amnesty will be granted. Consequently, taxpayers willing to enjoy amnesty should declare the income for the year 2016, file return and account for year 2016 by 30th June 2018, and transfer back to Kenya the funds voluntarily declared under the amnesty. Mr. Speaker, I expect KRA to issue regulations on the same and urge taxpayers to cash in on this amnesty and clean up their records with KRA. Mr. Speaker, accessible goods management system has applied a uniform cost of stamps irrespective of the cost of the various products. The uniform charge for the stamps has brought challenges in respect of the low-cost products. In order to enhance tax administration, regulations that provide for differentiated prices based on the cost of product will be gazetted shortly. Accordingly, the cost of stamps now ranges from 0.5 shillings to 2.5 shillings, depending on the cost of the product. Mr. Speaker, in order to discourage the consumption of illicit drinks, I have proposed 80% remission of excise duty in respect of the locally manufactured beer made from locally produced sorghum, millet, cassava, or any other produce, excluding barley. Mr. Speaker, the consumption of high-value spirits has increased tremendously. Accordingly, I also propose to increase the tax rate of spirits from 175 shillings per litre to 200 shillings per litre. While the taxation of beer has not changed, the inflation adjustment that will be affected from 1st July this year will increase government revenue in line with inflation. KRA will publish the new inflation-adjusted tax rates for all accessible goods shortly, which will reflect the inflation factor. Mr. Speaker, there's been industry concern on the current taxation of cigarettes in our country. The current single tax structure of 2,500 per mile of cigarettes has been inequitable and has adversely affected demand for locally produced low-value cigarettes. To cushion the local cigarette manufacturers from adverse financial effects due to loss in the market, I have proposed a two-tier tax structure of 2,500 per mil for cigarettes with filters and 1,800 per mil for plain cigarettes. This tax measure will ensure equity and fairness in the tobacco industry and prevent job losses in this sector. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, our country has faced challenges faced challenging times as a result of drought. The government has put in place measures to ensure that the impact of this disaster on the people of Kenya is alleviated. In addition, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow a deduction for expenditure incurred on donations for alleviation of distress during the national disaster as declared by the President. Such donation should be channeled through the Kenya Red Cross, county government, or any other institution responsible for the national disaster. Mr. Speaker, considering the hardship and the suffering associated with the recently declared national disaster as a result of widespread drought in the country, white maize will be imported on a tax-free basis for a period of 4 months. In addition, the dates, and in order to support our Muslim brothers, the importation of dates during the period of Ramadan will be done free of taxes. Mr. Speaker, ordinary bread and maize flour are VAT exempt, which means they do not benefit from deductions of input tax. Therefore, the input tax is inbuilt into their selling price. In order to make these commodities affordable to the common mwananchi, I propose to zero rate bread and maize flour to remove VAT altogether. Manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers who sell such goods will be expected to reduce the price of these basic commodities, failure to which I will reverse the policy. In addition, to further lower the costs to mwananchi, the importation of maize during the next 4 months will be duty-free. I expect, therefore, to see a reduction of prices for these basic commodities, which is enjoyed by a majority of our people. Mr. Speaker, it is the government policy to increase and deepen the country's sources of infrastructure financing. In order to achieve this, there is need for the government to support effective uptake of infrastructure financing products through tax neutrality for alternative measures for raising funds for such projects. I propose, therefore, to amend the VAT Act to exempt the transaction related to the transfer of assets into real estate investment trust and asset-backed securities. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's economic growth has outperformed the regional average for 8 consecutive years. We rightly deserve to be proud of our economic performance. However, Mr. Speaker, as I said at the beginning of my statement, we should not be complacent. If anything, now is the time to redouble our efforts to build upon the foundation of success. Looking ahead, these achievements need to be deepened and broadened so that the economy can be more resilient and benefits of the growth can be widely shared among all Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, these budgets will maximize social benefit for all Kenyans. It will support industries, create jobs, and improve the quality of lives of Kenyans. It will also help us realize the cleaner environment, provide quality social services, and enhance access to efficient public transport. In sum, it's a budget that carefully balances on the one hand the need to reduce the cost of living for the poor by enhancing social sector spending while continuing to strengthen the foundation for long-term economic growth, job creation, and provision of incentive for rapidly moving towards industrialization of our economy. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, allow me to express my gratitude to His Excellency the President and His Excellency the Deputy President for their guidance and wise counsel to me in managing the economic affairs of this country since the formation of this government. I'm very grateful to them. I would also like to thank my fellow cabinet secretaries and their principal secretaries for their support and contribution throughout the budget process. Mr. Speaker, I'm also sincerely grateful to the speakers of both the National and the Senate, the National Assembly and the Senate, and their respective clerks for overseeing the approval of the submission.
Brenda?
Absent.
John?
Absent.
Why are so many children absent? Children have become weaker.
To the members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee led by Chairman Honorable Mutava Musimi, and other departmental committees of Parliament for the comprehensive and constructive engagement in reviewing the budget estimates for the financial year 2017-2018. We are also grateful to the Majority Leader of the National Assembly, Honorable Aden Duale, for his relentless support to get most of our legislative proposals on financial matters passed through the House. We are also grateful to all members of the National Assembly and Senate for their cooperation and support. We are also grateful for the management and staff of the National Treasury under the able leadership of the Principal Secretary, Dr. Kamau Thuge, who have tirelessly worked long hours, including most weekends, to ensure that this budget and supporting documents meet the legal deadline. Mr. Speaker, this is a clear demonstration of their selfless services to this country, and we appreciate this extra effort by officers of the National Treasury to this exercise. We are also grateful for the management and the staff of the Central Bank of Kenya and the Kenya Revenue Authority for their contribution, the staff of the Attorney General Office, the staff of the Parliamentary Budget Office for providing support on the budget process. We are also grateful for our bilateral and multilateral development partners, as well as our private sector, for their contribution to our development agenda through their technical and financial support. To the media also for actively keeping Kenyans informed of the development in the financial year 2017-2018 budget process. Mr. Speaker, my utmost gratitude goes to the Kenyans for all walks of life, for their contribution, proposals, and suggestions received during the finalization of this budget. Finally, Mr. Speaker, allow me once again to thank all members of Parliament for your support in facilitating legislative proposals in supporting our economic transformation agenda over the last 4 years. As you go back to the electorate, I wish you well. My only appeal is that the campaign period will be peaceful to ensure that we do not reverse the economic gains we have achieved so far. I thank you, God bless you, and God bless Kenya. Thank you very much.
Order, members, order, those of you